Good evening, everybody. It's John here from Tutor2, welcoming you along to another of our live streams for GCSE Economics. Last week we talked about fiscal policies, and this week we're going to talk about supply side policies. So two different ways of dealing with those the economy's performance issues. I'll get my words out eventually. I'm joined, as I have been for the last few weeks, by Nikki on the left-hand side of the screen and Peter on the right-hand side. Good evening to you both.
Good evening. Hi, everyone.
Good evening, both.
Good to see you both. Now, just a quick reminder, if you've seen this before, or if you haven't seen this before, we've got a PowerPoint presentation that we're going to use as the backdrop for our fast-paced activities. That PowerPoint will be available for you to download as soon as this live stream is finished if you want to go through some of those questions. Again, we are recording this, so you'll be able to see it as well if you wanted to go through any questions. And if you are watching us on replay, a very warm welcome to you. I can see that we've got a few people waiting for us with their answers. Now, just to let you know, we've got a little bit of a delay between our broadcast and what you're seeing live on YouTube, about 15 seconds or so. So if we don't see your answers straight away, just bear with us while we wait for them to come in. But we would love to see your answers. Please do put your responses. Nice, easy multi-choice questions where you just give us A, B, C, or D, or if we get to the stage where we're asking slightly longer questions, do feel free to join in. Right, okay, I'll hand over to you guys and let's get started.
Right, what we're going to start with is 4 quick-fire multiple-choice questions this evening. So tonight we're talking about supply-side policies. So first question, obviously, which is the most accurate definition of supply-side policies? So nice and simple question to start with. What I'm hoping for is just some answers, A, B, C, or D. Because of the little delay, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a helping hand here. Now, it'd be very, very tempting to think A is correct. Policies that increase the production in an economy. But don't be fooled. It isn't production. We're not looking at an increase in output when we look at supply side policies. Shalia, hello. How nice to see you again. You've gone for C. And actually, we just need to think about B, policies that aim to increase the supply of goods and services. Well, that's very similar to A. It's just another way of saying A. So don't be caught out by this. It is, in fact, you're right, Shalia, with answer C. They are policies that aim to increase the productive capacity. So we don't necessarily have to have those extra goods and services. We just have to have the ability to actually produce them for supply side policies. So great start and a great question that really, really helps us to think about it. Right, number 2, which of the following would be classified as a supply side policy? So I want you to have a little read through those and see if you can get some answers through. Well done, Christy, on the last one. Got that right. Chloe, well done. Okay, so which of the following be classified as a supply side policy? Now, it would be very tempting to look at A again, an increase in spending on hospitals to provide greater variety. Now, the answer here is of treatments. So that's what makes us realize this isn't correct. If it was an increase in spending in hospitals to provide greater healthcare for workers so they got back to work faster, I could agree with you that perhaps A was right. Chloe is saying D, an increase in spending on infrastructure to improve labour mobility. You are spot on. Shalia, you're right too. Well done. Errol, you're right too. Fantastic. You're all on fire tonight. It is indeed spending on infrastructure to improve labour mobility. So that would be things like train stations or bus stations or motorway networks. Thank you, Bartholomew, for your lovely enthusiasm. Right, let's move on to question number 3. Which of the following would be considered a supply side policy aimed at improving productivity of the workforce? So this isn't increasing the workforce. This is making each and every worker more productive. Everybody is able to produce that little bit more. So what do we think? What do we think is the answer to supply side policy aimed at improving productivity? Let's have some answers. We've got answer C. It is straightforward, answer C. Let's move on to question 4. Which of the following would be considered a supply side policy aimed at encouraging more businesses to start up? So just be careful when reading the question. What I want you to do is to think about business startups. So in question 4, the answer that you might be tempted with is actually C, a reduction in trade union powers, because of course that would free up labour markets. But the reason you know it isn't trade union powers, answer C, is because trade unions are associated with big established companies. And in the question, it's talking about startups. So, can't be military. That's your red herring. That's the one that's completely wrong. Which one's it going to be? We think we got Chloe, we got Errol, we got Shalia, we've got lots of people coming in with A. You're spot on. Well done. Fantastic. I'm going to hand over to Peter.
Thank you very much, Nikki. So here we've got some examples of supply side policies to try to develop your your contextual knowledge and your contextual knowledge and understanding. I'll get there eventually, i.e. To help with your application. So we've got a number of different policies. What we'd like you to do is to classify them, put them under the umbrella. So which supply side policies are policies that are aimed at improving competition amongst businesses within markets? So which ones would you put under the umbrella? Which ones would you cast aside and not save from the rain? So I think we've got a clock coming up here to give you a bit of time. So answers in the chat window, please. The numbers will suffice. So just over halfway. Okay, I can't see any answers in the chat window just yet. I'll give you a couple more minutes and I'll talk through a few of the options just to see if that spurs anyone on. So what we're really looking for here is the numbers and which of these policies do you think are going to make markets more competitive. So great, some answers coming there from Chloe and Shella. I know there's a lot to read there. So don't worry if you've only picked out a few. Thanks very much, you two, for your contributions. We'll just wait to see if there's anyone else just out there that's wants to pop anything in. Errol, thank you very much with 1, 6, and 8. So Errol's got 1, 6, and 8. Shella 1, 3, and 6. Chloe for 6, 4, 1, and 8. So we've got some similarities. So let's take a look at what we've put, and then we'll explain why some aren't correct, and then we'll go through why some of them are. So let's start with the ones that we've left out. Increasing university tuition fees. If we just have a think back to what Nikki was saying when she was going through the MCQs. Increasing university tuition fees will be probably something you've come across in some case studies, maybe, or some of the work that you've done with your teachers. It's something that you would definitely come across with as a policy if you study economics at A level. Now, is increasing university tuition fees going to improve competition in markets? It's not. It is going to improve. University tuition fees are going to have an impact on the quality and the quantity of the labour force. So it is a supply side policy, but it's not going to be directly impactful on improving competition in markets. Nationalisation of railway operators. Well, you probably come across privatisation at some point. Nationalisation is the opposite of privatisation. So by nationalising, you've got one company running a railway operator. You've got a public sector monopoly. So that's not going to improve competition within markets either. It's going to have the opposite effect. And then imposing fees for vehicles entering low emission zones. Well, that's going to have the opposite effect too, because it's going to increase costs of production. So some businesses that have got quite an old fleet of vehicles, maybe that are older and more pollutant, so generate more pollutants. They're going to be charged high prices to get into the zones, and therefore those businesses can't effectively compete. So hopefully that makes sense as to why those won't increase competition in markets. So let's have a look at some of the ones that we've put under the umbrella. Number 4, allowing NHS organisations to contract some services to private business. So what we mean by this one is that there are elements of some organisations in the NHS that can be contracted out to the private sector, and the work can be done outside of the NHS, and various organisations might bid for that for that work, and they've got to try and prove that they can do it most efficiently at lowest cost. That is going to improve competition within the healthcare market. So it could be some medical operations, but it's something that might be more familiar with might be cleaning services, laundry services. All of those things are contracted out within the NHS to try and improve competition. Looking at number 3 that we've got there, investigating the impact of 2 firms merging. If we have 2 big businesses, let's just use a fictitious, let's use an example from the past. Asda and Sainsbury's, I think it was around about 2018, 2019, they wanted to come together and merge, but that merger was blocked by the Competition and Markets Authority, because one of the reasons why it was blocked is that the regulator thought it would lead to a substantial lessening of competition, so the market would be less competitive. So by investigating the potential impacts, that gives us as economists a way of trying to see how competition can be improved within markets. So there's 3 other examples there that I'm not going to read through with you, but they're really, really good for taking away for your revision, increasing the number of regions with access to high-speed broadband. Try to think how you could make some chains of reasoning to explain how and why they could increase competition. I'll hand you back over now to Nikki.
Thank you very much, Peter. Really, really interesting stuff there. Okay, we are going to do the bubble quiz. So this, if you remember rightly, is like a bit of a multiple choice, but with a difference. So you might have 1 answer that's right, 2 answers, it might be 3 answers, or 4, or it might be no answers correct. So what I'm looking for in the chat window is, for example, it might be B and C, or B, D, or whatever you think are the right answers. Give me the letters for the right answers. Okay, so which of these are examples of a direct tax? Now you might be thinking, well, what on earth is a direct tax question doing in supply side policies revision? Well, of course, direct taxes can affect incentives. They can affect incentives to work, or they can affect incentives to actually perhaps buy products. So Shalia has come straight in with all of them as being examples of direct direct taxes. I'm not sure I completely agree with you. Bartholomew says A, B, C, and D as well. Now, remember, a definition of a direct tax is one that you can't, is on income, it's on a stream of revenue. An indirect tax you can, in theory, avoid because it's on a good or service. So let's have a think about that. Income tax is on my income. Corporation tax is on a firm's income. National insurance contributions is on my income. But I only pay council tax if I own a house or have a deal with somebody who I'm renting that house. So council tax wouldn't be an example of a direct tax. It's an indirect tax. So I don't think we had any completely correct answers, but well done for trying. Okay, number 2. Which of these are forms of industrial action associated with trade unions? We talked about trade unions a little bit earlier. So industrial action is what the collective trade union get involved with when they act together to counteract the power of the employer. So what sort of thing might they be associated with? Okay. Is it work to rule? Have you heard of that? What work to rule is if you literally stick by the minute, you stick to the rules, you go and consult the handbook for every single stage of your job. You would work to rule. It really, really, really slows your productivity down. You go and look everything up. So what do we think is a form of industrial action? Let's have a look. We think definitely work to rule. That is an example. Compulsory redundancies. Is that something that trade unions would be asking for? I don't think try and stop that, and they try and make them go for voluntary redundancies. Overtime ban. Well, that would be all about getting the workers to refuse to do overtime because that's a cheap way of spreading out extra work. You just make people work longer hours, when in actual fact, if there is more work than the number of people employed, perhaps you should employ more rather than just force the people to do overtime. So let's have a look. We all know about strikes. Well done. Thank you very much, John. It is A, work to rule, C, overtime ban, and D, strikes. Don't we all know about strikes with the train strikes and the bus strikes and everybody, doctors strikes, nurses strikes. There we go. Okay, let's have a look at question 3. Which of these would be considered supply side policy? So lots and lots of examples this evening. Would increasing taxes on profits generated by research and development? Remember what Peter was saying, remember what I was saying. Supply side policies aim to free up, make markets work better, increase productive potential of an economy, Would increasing taxes on research and development do that? Spending on improvements of roads and railways to reduce commute times. That's a banker, isn't it? We know about that one. Cuts in social welfare benefits to encourage more people to work. Now, this is pretty harsh, but it has been tried by governments and it does work. If you cut welfare benefits, then people are poorer if they're out of work, so it encourages them to work more. And then increased tariffs on imported goods to protect domestic industries. That's not right, is it, Chloe? I think you are absolutely spot on with B and C. You are absolutely spot on. Well done, Chloe. Right, let's have a look at question 4. Question 4 is, which of these educational reforms, so which of these reforms would help improve the quality of the labour force, if you like, help us to be more productive? Compulsory inclusion of maths and English for post-16, that sounds pretty good. Increase funding to incentivise schools to run vocational courses, so they're not just A-levels, but we have T-levels as well, or other vocational courses. That would help, wouldn't it? Ban the use of mobile phones in the classroom. That was in the news last week. I hope you're all watching the news. It wasn't a ban, it was an advisory to stop students using mobile phones in the classroom. And then restricting availability of sugary drinks. What do we think? What do we think? So I can see some answers coming in with just A and B. Just A and B. Yeah, lots of answers. Yeah, you are spot on. It is just A and B. C and D are more welfare issues. Whilst they're both valid, you could argue they will improve educational outcomes. They're not actually strictly supply side policies. Right, back to Peter.
Thanks, Nikki. So again, we're trying to look at some examples here. In the chat window, can you give me 3 examples of supply-side policies that can help combat high levels of inflation? So usually we consider monetary policy when we're looking at high levels of inflation, but we want supply-side policies here. So any ideas that you've got, any words that come to mind here, folks, examples of supply-side policies that can help reduce inflation. What's been going on in the real world? Answers come in. Okay, so 30 seconds wasn't an awful lot of time. As we said at the start, there's a little bit of a lag there. I've got one answer coming in from Laurentius. I think I pronounced that correctly, so thank you very much. Let's just see if we've got anything else before we show you ours. I'm conscious of the time. Okay, let's take a look at our answers. So 3 examples for you to take here. Reducing regulation to drive competition and reduce prices. Remember, regulation, those are rules that can make it a little bit harder, possibly more expensive for businesses. If regulation's reduced, and therefore their costs are going to reduce, and they can cut their prices. There's trade unions again, where we've seen trade unions a couple of times. If you reduce the bargaining power that trade unions have to push for higher wages, or possibly make strike action a little bit more difficult, that can reduce higher wage demands, which of course adds to cost push inflation. A great point there from Chloe, investment in infrastructure. And I like the point that you made about efficiency there. Excellent. One that you might be familiar with, subsidising the rollout of smart energy meters to reduce the costs of providing energy. That also pushes onto consumers, isn't it, to try to be more mindful with the energy that they use, and therefore reducing their own energy bills. And if we think about that in a business context, if a business uses a smart meter, it isn't going to be, it's more mindful of its the cost that it's incurring. It could be a little bit more efficient, and therefore it doesn't need to put its prices up as much, and that helps keep cost push inflation potentially low. So we hope those are of use to you. I'm just going to pass over now, Nikki, to Nikki for the final activity.
Right, final activity tonight, an on balance question. So we need to think about advantages, but then we need to balance it out with disadvantages. So we want one advantage and one disadvantage of using supply side policies. Now, I'm aware of this delay, and this delay I think is getting slightly longer. So I'm probably not going to be seeing your answers anytime soon. But what we can do perhaps is go to have a look at an advantage, if we can, John. We've got two. Right, they can increase international competitiveness for domestic firms. So when we free up our markets and we make our markets work better, that means that our labour is more productive, or that perhaps we can even be more efficient, and that we can actually reduce costs. And that means that we can sell our products abroad more cheaply. We are more internationally competitive. Okay, a second advantage we've got here. I'm come back to you in a moment, Chloe. They encourage and allow economic growth without inflationary pressure. Now, that's exactly what Chloe said, where we have the long run aggregate supply shifting right, also aggregate supply or supply curve shifting right. And that would then help reduce the general price level, reducing inflationary pressure. Let's have a look at the disadvantages. So there we have got some come in from Chloe again. There's a time lag. Now, this is a really important point. Supply side policies, you can always say they take a long time to work, about 10 to 20 years. And even if you've got something that might work fairly quickly, like building a new road within a year, the full effect, you can always put in your exam question, the full effect may take 10 or 20 years. The other disadvantage is, of course, the opportunity cost. Students never really use that concept, and they should. It's a banker in an exam. So the opportunity cost of government spending on these supply side policies might be, well, then they don't have as much money to spend on hiring doctors or on buying textbooks in schools, or perhaps some other government spending that's considered necessary. So always use opportunity cost. It's one to have up your sleeve. Okay, well done.
Brilliant. Yeah, well done. Well done to those of you who have responded positively to tonight's live stream and given us some decent answers there. It's very kind of you, very useful. Don't forget that the PowerPoint that Nikki and Peter have been using will be available to you to download as soon as we finish. Massive, massive thank you, of course, to Nikki and Peter for delivering that. Some really useful stuff. Hopefully people will be able to take that forward when they're thinking about their exams in just a few months' time. Now, we're taking a little bit of a hiatus for the next few weeks whilst the team around me are all delivering live workshops around the country. So we'll be back in April to do a few more of these live streams for GCSE economics, and we would love to see you then. Until that point, I'll say goodbye. Goodbye to everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, folks.
See you soon.